According to Christian tradition, the image of Edessa was a holy relic consisting of a square or rectangle of cloth upon which a miraculous image of the face of Jesus had been imprinted, the first icon in the Orthodox Churches, including English-speaking Orthodoxy. The image is generally known as the Manda Lion. By this account, King Abgar of Edessa wrote to Jesus, asking him to come cure him of an illness. Abgar received a reply letter from Jesus, declining the invitation, but promising a future visit by one of his disciples. Instead, one of the 70 disciples, Thaddeus of Edessa, is said to have come to Edessa, bearing the words of Jesus, by the virtues of which the king was miraculously healed. This tradition was first recorded in the early 4th century by Eusebius of Caesarea, who said that he had transcribed and translated the actual letter in the Syriac chancery documents of the king of Edessa, but who makes no mention of an image. The report of an image which accrued to the legendarium of Abgar first appears in the Syriac work, The Doctrine of Edessa. According to it, the messenger, here called Ananias, was also a painter, and he painted the portrait, which was brought back to Edessa and conserved in the royal palace. The first record of the existence of a physical image in the ancient city of Edessa was in Evagrius Scholasticus, writing about 593, who reports a portrait of Christ of divine origin, which effected the miraculous aid in the defense of Edessa against the Persians in 544. The image was moved to Constantinople in the 10th century. The cloth disappeared from Constantinople during the sack of Constantinople in 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, and is believed by some to have reappeared as a relic in King Louis IX of France's Sainte-Chapelle in Paris. This relic disappeared in the French Revolution. The provenance of the Edessa letter between the 1st century and its location in his own time are not reported by Eusebius. The materials, according to the scholar Robert Eisenman, are very widespread in the Syriac sources, with so many multiple developments and divergences that it is hard to believe they could all be based on Eusebius's poor efforts. The Eastern Orthodox Church observes a feast for this icon on August 16th, which commemorates its translation from Edessa to Constantinople. History of the legend. The story of the Manda Lion is likely the product of centuries of development. The first version is found in Eusebius's History of the Church. Eusebius claimed that he had transcribed and translated the actual letter in the Syriac chancery documents of the king of Edessa. This records a letter written by King Abgar of Edessa to Jesus, asking him to come cure him of an illness. Jesus replies by letter, saying that when he had completed his earthly mission and ascended to heaven, he would send a disciple to heal Abgar. At this stage, there is no mention of an image of Jesus. In AD 384, Egeria, a pilgrim from either Gaul or Spain, was given a personal tour by the Bishop of Edessa, who provided her with many marvelous accounts of miracles that had saved Edessa from the Persians, and put into her hands transcripts of the correspondence of Abgar and Jesus, with embellishments. Part of her accounts of her travels in letters to her sisterhood, Savai. She naively supposed that this version was more complete than the shorter letter which she had read in a translation at home, presumably one brought back to the far west by an earlier pilgrim. Her escorted tour, accompanied by a translator, was thorough. The bishop is quoted, "Now let us go to the gate where the messenger Ananias came in with the letter of which I have been telling you." There was, however, no mention of any image reported by Egeria, who spent 3 days inspecting every corner of Edessa and the environs. The next stage of development appears in the Doctrine of Edessa, c. 400, which introduces a court painter among a delegation sent by Abgar to Jesus, who paints a portrait of Jesus to take back to his master. When Hanan, the keeper of the archives, saw that Jesus spoke thus to him, by virtue of being the king's painter, he took and painted a likeness of Jesus with choice paints, and brought with him to Abgar the king, his master. And when Abgar the king saw the likeness, he received it with great joy, and placed it with great honor in one of his palatial houses. The later legend of the image recounts that because the successors of Abgar reverted to paganism, the bishop placed the miraculous image inside a wall, and setting a burning lamp before the image, he sealed them up behind a tile. That the image was later found again, after a vision, on the very night of the Persian invasion, and that not only had it miraculously reproduced itself on the tile, but the same lamp was still burning before it. Further, that the Bishop of Edessa used a fire into which oil flowing from the image was poured to destroy the Persians. The image itself is said to have resurfaced in 525, during a flood of the Dazan, a tributary stream of the Euphrates that passed by Edessa. This flood is mentioned in the writings of the court historian Procopius of Caesarea. In the course of the reconstruction work, a cloth bearing the facial features of a man was discovered hidden in the wall above one of the gates of Edessa. Writing soon after the Persian siege of 544, Procopius says that the text of Jesus' letter, by then including a promise that no enemy would ever enter the city, was inscribed over the city gate, but does not mention an image. Procopius is skeptical about the authenticity of the promise, but says that the wish to disprove it was part of the Persian king Khosrau I's motivation for the attack, as it kept irritating his mind. Some 50 years later, Evagrius Scholasticus in his ecclesiastical history is the first to mention a role for the image in the relief of the siege, attributing it to a God-made image, a miraculous imprint of the face of Jesus upon a cloth. Thus we can trace the development of the legend from a letter, but no image in Eusebius, to an image painted by a court painter in a dye, which becomes a miracle caused by a miraculously created image supernaturally made when Jesus pressed a cloth to his wet face in Evagrius. It was this last and later stage of the legend that became accepted in Eastern Orthodoxy, the image of Edessa that was created by God, and not produced by the hands of man. This idea of an icon that was agarapoietos is a separate enrichment of the original legend. Similar legends of supernatural origins have accrued to other Orthodox icons. The Ancha icon is reputed to be the Charamedion. Another agarapoietos recorded from an early period, miraculously imprinted with the face of Christ by contact with the Manda Lion. To art historians it is a Georgian icon of the 6th–7th century. Later events. The Holy Manda Lion disappeared again after the Sasanians conquered Edessa in 609. A local legend, related to historian Andrew Palmer when he visited Urfa in 1999, relates that the towel burial cloth of Jesus was thrown into a well in what is today the city's great mosque. The Christian tradition exemplified in Georgios Kedrenis' Historiarum Compendium is at variance with this. John Silitz is recounting how in 944, when the city was besieged by John Korkoar, it was exchanged for a group of Muslim prisoners. At the time the image of Edessa was taken to Constantinople, where it was received amidst great celebration by Emperor Romanos I Lekarpenos, who deposited it in the Theotokos of the Pharos Chapel in the great palaces of Constantinople. Not in consequence, the earliest known Byzantine icon of the Manda Lion, a holy face, preserved at St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt, is dated c. 945. The Manda Lion remained under imperial protection until the Crusaders sacked the city in 1204 and carried off many of its treasures to Western Europe. though the Image of Edessa is not mentioned in this context in any contemporary document. Similarly, it is thought that the Shroud of Turin disappeared from Constantinople in 1204, when Crusaders looted the city. The leaders of the Crusader army in this instance were French and Italian, and it is believed that somehow because of this, the shroud made its way to France. A small part of a relic, believed to be the same as this, was one of the large groups sold by Baldwin II of Constantinople to Louis IX of France in 1241 and housed in the Sainte-Chapelle in Paris until it disappeared during the French Revolution. The famous Portuguese Jesuit Geronimo Lobo, who visited Rome in 1637, mentions the sacred portrait sent to King Abgar as being in this city. I saw the famous relics that are preserved in that city as in a sanctuary, a large part of the holy crossed pieces of the crown and several thorns, the sponge, the lance, St. Thomas's finger, one of the 30 coins for which the Saviour was sold, the sacred portrait, the one that Christ our Lord sent to King Abgar, the sacred staircase on which Christ went up and down from the praetorium, the head of the Holy Baptist, the column, the altar on which St. Peter said Mass, and countless other relics. Links with the Shroud of Turin. Author Ian Wilson has argued that the object venerated as the Manda Lion from the 6th to the 13th centuries was in fact the Shroud of Turin, folded in four, and enclosed in an oblong frame so that only the face was visible. Wilson cites documents in the Vatican Library and the University of Leiden, Netherlands, which seem to suggest the presence of another image at Edessa. A 10th-century codex, Codex Vossianus Latinus Q69, found by Gino Zanonotto in the Vatican Library, contains an 8th-century account saying that an imprint of Christ's whole body was left on a canvas kept in a church in Edessa. It quotes a man called Smera in Constantinople. King Abgar received a cloth on which one can see not only a face but the whole body. Surviving images. 2 images survive today which are associated with the Manda Lion. Holy Face of Genoa. This image is kept in the Church of St. Bartholomew of the Armenians in Genoa, Italy. In the 14th century it was donated to the Doge of Genoa Leonardo Montaldo by the Byzantine Emperor John V Palaeologus. It has been the subject of a detailed 1969 study by Colette de Forbozzo, who dated the outer frame to the late 14th century, giving a terminus antique UUEM for the inner frame and the image itself. Bozzo found that the image was imprinted on a cloth that had been pasted onto a wooden board. The similarity of the image with the Veil of Veronica suggests a link between the two traditions. Holy Face of San Silvestro. This image was kept in Rome's Church of San Silvestro in Capiti, attached to a convent of Poor Clares, up to 1870, and is now kept in the Matilda Chapel in the Vatican Palace. It is housed in a Baroque frame added by Sister Dianora Chiarucci, head of the convent, in 1623. The earliest evidence of its existence is 1517, when the nuns were forbidden to exhibit it to avoid competition with the Veronica. Like the Genoa image, it is painted on board and therefore is likely to be a copy. It was exhibited at Germany's Expo 2000 in the Pavilion of the Holy See. Veil of Veronica.